Hey, Subhash. Hello.
Yeah, hi Rahul.
Hey, Subhash. How are you?
I'm
Long.
good. Yeah,
Hey, Byung. How are you? Alexi. Shh.
Hey, how are you? Just
Hey.
started work today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to just pull up the wiki page. Meanwhile, others join in. Yes. Yeah, Alexi. I see a hand raised, Alexi. I was just going to. Is there a question or a doubt or? Okay. We have folks. I think we have a quorum. 4 minutes into the call. Okay, the button doesn't work. Okay, not sure if I can mute you. Yeah, I think you're able to unmute. Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You unmuted me. I don't know. For some reason, I couldn't unmute myself.
I've seen this
Um,
from somewhere else as well today. Yeah.
Thanks for helping out. Raul, I have, um, if I don't know if I can have a quick topic on the agenda today. I can
Sure.
only make the first 30 minutes, but I'd like to bring a topic regarding, but I think you have something about scope in there or clear deliverable for R3.
Yeah.
My topic is along these lines. So I just want to have maybe 5-10 minutes to discuss how SIG security is going to be able to work R3 scope and onwards identify a process to work with SIG1. And we don't need to identify or flesh out everything today. It's just I want to start the discussion. So that's why I was able to join the first 30 minutes today.
Fantastic. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, this would, in fact, we would love some guidance here because being so if there are any specific priorities or things that have been discussed, like Wim had been bringing to the notice some of the action items. So if there are any other action items that we might not possibly be aware of, would be great to bring to the table. This could be the first step.
I don't think there is sorry, but I didn't mean to hijack, but if you want, I can go ahead now. So there is no specific user stories today in SIG1 related to security. There are a bunch of user stories regarding, service assurance, regarding ORAN, how to implement ORAN as a use case, a couple of user stories about, the Nephew SDK, so the user experience. There is nothing fundamentally security related today. And what I wanted to understand is what is some sort of the scope of the SIG5? Are you defining security requirement that we take in SIG1 and need to define how to implement these requirements? Or are you going to do both, define the requirements as well as define how they can be implemented? Because if you also define the how, then I think it will nicely fit in the process that we're establishing in SIG1. So we have ways to define the how with a user story template, with specific artifacts that we need to produce. So SIG2 can then look at the user stories themselves or the requirement and how we envision them to be implemented and define a roadmap. So that was so before jumping into too much detail, I need to understand where does SIG security, work ends, basically.
So I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm voicing out my opinion as to the scope of the work. So it would just be in the form of specifying the requirements. It would be in the form of execution as well. But we clearly understand that for execution, right, we would have to build certain competency in the context. So competency in the sense that how is Nephew's current solutions work together, different components of Nepheo work together. Uh, Understanding that and then pushing for a solution, that's what basically our intention is. But great point here in terms of user story templates. I think I've seen this template before, but is it possible I couldn't, if you have a link handy with yourself, if you can send me the link, that would be great. I can add it here.
Yeah, I absolutely do have the link handy, and I'm happy actually to take this group through it, because what you just said is actually part of the user story template. So so there is the user story itself. Okay, thank you for putting it on the screen. That is about, okay, feature review, stakeholders, design, architecture, consideration, prerequisite, the requirement themselves, acceptance criteria, priority. And then if you scroll a bit down, you see component architecture, need for software development, API design, and end-to-end test. And so the last 4 components of the user story template are really artifacts where we need to look at what is Nepheo today and how that user story is going to enhance Nepheo. For instance, I saw quickly service mesh or secret management.
Mm-hmm.
So how would that fit in the component architecture? Yeah. What kind of, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think you see the point. So if this is something that you'd like to look at and consider for not only the requirement definition, but also how this requirement could fit in the architecture and then be implemented, that would be ideal. You don't have to take that template, but if you want to take it, that would be ideal. Because then in SIG1, what we do is we have a working group to do the scoping of the release, where we're working with SIG2. And basically, we use all the user stories that has been defined to try to come up with a roadmap and a scope for each releases.
Got it. So is this information in the context of SIG1 kept on the wiki pages itself or kept somewhere else?
So I'm doing so everything related to SIG1 is in the SIG1 Google Drive. I just pasted the link.
Okay.
I'm just reworking the structure of the Google Drive, so it's very recent. And the user story template is part of, you see working group 3, RX scope and user stories. That's where it falls into.
Got it.
But I mean, anything you need from SIG1, I'm happy to help you navigate. Things are moving right now because we're adding new structure very recently. But it's not about the structure, so I don't need this team to care too much about that. But I just want to understand what to expect in terms of actual outcomes from SIG security.
Right. Yeah. In fact, today is the first time we are discussing actually what are the deliverables that we can identify in the context of R3 release. So certainly the user story template and the other information in the context would help us. But what we had discussed in the past few weeks is about service mesh and secrets management. And we understand that this is one of the existing pain points anyways. So this is something that will drive. But again, this is something that we had few discussions as of now. The aim is to understand what other deliverables we can target for R3 and if there are any owners in the context. So let's open the floor before we discuss the service mesh requirements and the secrets management next steps.
Raul, this is Byung. Questions. So if you scope for R3, supporting service mesh and secret management, I think the Prashant, did I pronounce your name correctly? He provides some kind of architecture of the secret management. Looking at his test, we treat as an initial architecture and service mesh. So far, we using the in ONAP, we means the ONAP and the other. We use the sidecar based service mesh. That means how the component of the nephew, not just the built-in nephew component, but possibly added by operator and other vendors, because the nephew allows that. When they adding into the nephew ecosystem, how are you gonna provide that service car configuration? I mean, are you if I talk about implementation, Istio, for example, you have to provide some kind of configuration to setting up the sidecar for all the component. I don't think sidecar as component is not yet in production quality, so to my knowledge. But I know, Raul, you mentioned about the Cube Armor, but we are interested for NF. But I'm talking about nephew component service mesh requirement, or you were talking about service mesh requirement not only nephew component built-in and the customized component like controller, but also are you talking about the network function deployed through the nephew? So I think we need to, if you want to create some kind of a user story, then probably you can talk about that. What do you expect? And then based on that, the architecture and like Prashant provide for secret management, we may need some kind of architecture for service mesh for nephew. Then we talking about how the component interact securely. For example, one controller talking to another controller, and through the service mesh. Then that's kind of an idea, because we don't want to put the security concern in every controller. That's too much. And that's kind of a user story I think we need to form, in my opinion. But you discussed the service mesh secret management, and this is first time I joined. So I just talking about if Alex is looking for some kind of user story which can be tangible for R3, if you're looking for that one, maybe this group may work on that kind of user story first and the architecture. I think I read the secret management architecture, that's pretty reasonable. I think they're good. And I think we need a similar kind of the study for service mesh too.
Right. In fact, in the last call, what we discussed was we're not sure whether Istio can actually handle all the requirements from the service mesh perspective that we have for nephew. We might have to do some sort of analysis in terms of like this. One a few of the points that were raised was the ability to have multi interface deployments.
Yes.
And dual stack implementations and things like that, if they have to be taken into consideration. So these
I think I
requirements have
agree.
been jotted down. Yeah.
I agree. The ONAP has different scenario, and we have fixed the numbers of the component and the pretty stable component, so we can have some kind of a the capability to the configuring that service mesh. But however, nephew is different. If you scroll down, you can see the architecture of the ONAP, but ONAP and nephew are a little different, because if you keep scrolling down, you can see the diagram. This is just keep going. Yes, this kind of if you're talking about component A, component B, component C, is a prefixed the ONAP component. ONAP doesn't have any the dynamic controller coming from the vendor. We are changing that scenario, but so far, so we have the prefixed number of the component in ONAP. So in we have a team in OOM. We define the sidecar Istio based, and all the configure Android proxy, and also all the policies, authentication policy, authorization policy. We have some luxury to handle that. For communication in component A to component B, we purely using the proxy based sidecar. But external communication, we engage the Istio ingress gateway, which has OS2, and then we have protection, and then applying the item. But the Nephew is more dynamic. Okay, Nephew from the beginning architecturally they can add additional controller by vendor at any time. That means when they bring in the Nephew controller, you have to consider how to protect that component without putting the actual security concern into the application itself. So that means the systemized platform level, and somehow we have to manage it. So for secret management cluster, Prasan, he mentioned about they create the tokens and managing the secrets and distribute the secrets through the workload cluster. I think the service mesh, yeah, I agree. We need some study. It's different from the existing system. I think it's also different from Oren, Alexis. I think if you have some insight of the secret service mesh management, Oren, but Nephew is more dynamic in my mind. So for now, there's a built-in system. We can start from there, and bring in some customized the vendor operator provide the controller and the other configuration. How to do that? Then user story may need to reflect that study. My opinion.
Yeah. So the point is that we need to have user story cast out properly before we go to the next step, right?
Yes, and we need the input from analysis. What you provide, you lay out what your expectation, but and I think the Rao's group, his group need to study, understand the Nephew architecture, component architecture, and also customized controller architecture, and how to bring in, how to the retire, and how dynamically doing it. But we have to provide the secure communications through service mesh if you want to engage the service mesh. But as you said, Istio, they have some limitation. So, and Rao, you are the expert on the other systems. So we can we need to do what we want for R3.
Yeah. So once we have the user stories created properly, right? Like based on that, we might have to check back. I think the primary problem that usually gets quoted in the context of Istio is its impact on the overall performance. It's a sidecar model. Then there are other models that have evolved recently, including the ambient mesh and the likes. But the point is there are multiple options now. Istio, Linkerd, service mesh, Cilium service mesh, or we might have to take into consideration security fundamentals of across all of these options as well, right? Like having a host singleton model versus sidecar model. If you want to get into that discussion, I think all of these things eventually will spill over in the form of requirements, and then these requirements, if we agree, and I feel it is best if we can, once we have the requirements clear, we can bring it to the SIG1, and maybe if there is any other team that needs to be involved in this decision making process, we can discuss with them.
I think this team creating some documentation, user story, or architecture, and then consulted with the SIG1, and then Alex is that you are the one this team need to contact with that information.
Right. So I want to just go back to this particular step here, since we have more participation today. So in terms of identifying deliverables for R3, is there any specific point that anyone wants to bring up in the context, take ownership? Maybe not now, but if you have something already in mind, please call it out. Yeah.
Have you guys discussed this one? I thought the service mesh and the script is the kind of deliverable. I thought before I joined this meeting, maybe you guys already talk about what deliverable for R3. I thought that's the service mesh and secret, but I don't know what else you want to
No,
talk about.
So we haven't formally, had any discussion in the context of R3 deliverables. This is the first time that we are bringing this topic, but we had, based on our previous discussions in the TSC meetings and with a few of the other team members, they raised that so there might be certain requirements that might have to be prioritized. For example, secrets management. There are certain gaping holes. So right now, in the way in which the secrets are handled today, and that's how it was brought to this list, but it was not a decision that was being made, across the SIG as of now. So yeah, it's still an open. What are the deliverables for R3 is still an open question. Yeah.
I think there's a raised hand,
Yeah.
Subhash and Kiran Johnston.
Subhash, you want to go first?
Yeah, hi Rahul.
Hey.
So yeah, I was also thinking we could by using the security charter and the this specific project, we could bring the common governance framework in the nephew. So actually, recently in the last release R2, I was attempting the policy framework. So that was involving some of the open source it's like a runtime policy and the design time policies. So so those ideas I wanted to bring in. So in that context, I was trying to form the policy, and I feel that that policy could be bring here, and we could bring the idea of common governance management in the if you like we would be running the we were preparing the policies related to access management, or maybe some kind of validation or different scenarios we can take, and we prepare the policy in the management cluster and pass it to the workload cluster, or even the within the nephew component. So so we can use that policy framework here and try to build up some ideas and try to deliver in the R3. So just I'm thinking around these ideas. So what do you think?
Subhash, one comment here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if a policy actually controls security. Is the insecurity policy is one of them. So Istio, they have a policy for authentication authorization. We don't have separate policy framework. Some of them, even though we're not using Istio and other open source tool, they're including this capability, configuring policy in their script. So that means it's different. I'm not sure about your policy framework here, because there are many ways to handle security, and in security framework, including embed some of the policy management, and then also these days, I'm not sure this is the future, the direction. There's so many AI-based the security, and in ONAP SecCom, we are discussing about that because it based on the analysis predefined the pattern, and they determine what to do with the security. Okay, so not just the human determine the policy. There's some other ways to do that. So anyway, so for R3, I'm not sure. We can discuss. Okay, I'm not gonna discount you, but policy is part of the security, but not policy control security. So that's some little the concern. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We can segregate those ideas, and we could provide some mechanism for operators also, so that they can bring their organizational policy here, and they can. I'm just giving one example. Like suppose I want to pull the images from certain specific repositories. Otherwise I don't allow it. So those kind of policy could be configured, and it could be applied to the certain workload cluster. It need not be computed by the need not to involve AI or any complicated stuff. But yeah, it gives us the pivot points where operator itself or operator they can configure their organizational policies or some infra related policies by themselves, by just using some certain models or a certain CRDs, I would say. So yeah, this approaches could be taken. So that would be, I think, that could be a beneficial and bring some advantage to the few.
Okay,
That's
quickly,
myself,
the
yeah.
Lao show the ONAP architecture. ONAP architecture, we're using the item, we're using the kick-wrap, and you can define policy, you can define role-based access control, all the configuration. So we have a mixture, and also Istio Ingress gateway, we're using the some validation and some kind of a script, the policy there. So anyway, so that's what I'm saying, that this policy framework is not just a policy framework, but we have concept policy has to be engaged in for security. But that's my point. Okay. Anyway. Okay.
Hey folks, I have to unfortunately drop off today in 2 minutes. I'll keep the meeting room open, but Sharon, maybe next, if can you go ahead? What was the point?
Yeah, I mean, I need to drop as well, so maybe I don't know whether we'll all need to drop. I think Alexis is dropping as well, but I just wanted to raise a question. We had a list internally that we wanted to look at identity access management policies, rules around accessing custom resources through Kubernetes, and then other APIs that we expose. Do we want to have some kind of implementation for security support in FE1R3? So roles, groups, users, integration with external item systems and so on.
Got it. So, okay.
Hey, this is Raj. I just have a suggestion. Maybe some of us, and we can create a column here for ideas and thoughts, and then everybody can chime in into the wiki, and then we can reiterate on it in the next meeting. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I'm sorry, folks. I have to drop off in 1 minute, unfortunately, today. One thing, I feel eventually whatever we do, right? Like we'll have to have a crisp requirements, and those requirements might have to be accepted across the teams, as in those are the real problem statements that we might want to concentrate in the next release. That we need some acceptance from a broader group. So these are the few criteria that we might have to first be on, and then maybe we can continue. So if we have a proposal, that's great. In fact, we now have a user story template in case someone already had prepared such kind of user story templates in the context of requirements that you are bringing forth. Please share it either on the Slack channel or directly drop it in this meeting notes itself, if possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, folks. So how do we want to continue today? Sorry, folks, I need to jump off today. I can make someone a host, and if you want to continue discussion, I can go through the recording later. Is there anyone who would like to be the host? Can I make being yourself the host?
I think that you and the Raj, many people left, so maybe we can continue discuss next week, or we're gonna continue additional topics. So I mean, we are okay. So we're gonna ask, what do you think, Tim?
So basically, what I feel is that if anything is to be discussed, we can discuss, put up proposals and discuss, as put up a document and then comment on it. I think that's also a way to go forward.
Yeah.
So.
Or the Prashant, he introduced his architecture concept.
Yeah. We had certain discussions to be happen, but unfortunately today. So, Wim, you were saying something? Do you have since you
joined? I was not saying. I was just unmuting. I was just saying. I mean, if people want, I'm able to stay, right? So we can.
Thank you very much. I'll make you the host, Wim. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So do we want to go over a certain proposal or discussion?
I'm okay, Wim. Yeah.
Only thing is, I think the Prashant, he work on the secret management, so maybe he can display and then he can provide some insight, share with us.
Yeah, that's maybe.
Unless you have other topics.
Yeah, I also had some, people had some questions. I may not be able to answer all of them, so hopefully you can help. I'll share my screen.
Okay.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I saw the recording for the last week's meeting, and there were discussions of token controller and from our repo as well, right?
Yep.
So I read the code, right, readme, and made this documentation kind of thing, and hopefully if anyone has question, they're commenting it, so that's nice. And I just like Shiv had some questions. Shiv, can you ask because Vim is here and I guess he can help.
Yeah, great. Can you go to that the
Mail.
diagram, the
Oh,
sequence diagram? Yeah. So over here, basically, so we had the token controller, which is basically creating an access token, and that populates some sort of a secret, right? Vim? That would be the way.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the bootstrap secret controller will read that secret, and then based upon some annotations, it will basically determine which cluster it is to be written, and then it writes to the workload cluster.
Yes, that's correct. And and it uses the kubeconfig from the cluster API to get access to the workload cluster, which is an
Okay.
admin right. So it has full admin rights, which I don't think is good, but it's what it is right now.
So through
Okay.
the kubeconfig, right? Beam.
Yeah. So what happens? So the token controller creates a token based on a CRD that is so as part of so when we instantiate a cluster, it's a dual indirection actually, but I think for this discussion it doesn't matter. But what actually matters is that per cluster, we actually create two tokens. One stays within the management cluster. So one is to access for ports to access that repo. So the tokens, the purpose of those tokens are only to access repos. But we generate a separate token for ports and another token for config sync eventually, right? And or whatever other GitOps tool that we would be using, right? And so the first token remains on the management cluster, right? So that's, I don't think there is a major issue there, other than the fact that secrets are not maybe the most secure way of doing this, right? But the second token that is needed for the GitOps systems has to be, let's say, communicated towards the workload cluster because the config sync or the GitOps tools are always pull-based, right? And that's true, I think, for all the systems that I'm aware about. So like Flux and Argo and config sync, they all do pulls, right? So they need a token to access that repo. And so that's the token so that's the flow that you see here. I just wanted to highlight that there is a second token, actually, just for completeness. So that token at the moment, so yeah, we do a special annotation of that token. And that is then the way that the Bootstrap secret controller knows that it has to then send it to the workload cluster. And so what happens is the Bootstrap secret controller watches secrets, basically. And it's if a secret has a specific annotation that tells it that it has to do this sending towards the workload cluster, it will have to get the credentials of that workload cluster to access it. And how it does that is by, so the cluster, when we create the cluster using Cluster API, Cluster API also creates a secret for a cluster that represents the kubeconfig to access that cluster. And so what we do in the Bootstrap controller is first we know based on the annotation that that secret needs to be transferred. And then we access the, let's say, the Cluster API secret to get the credential or the access rights to access that cluster, and that is then used to transact or map or create that secret from the management cluster to the workload cluster. So that's the flow, I think.
Okay, so then there,
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
so, yeah. So then there are basically two types of secrets. One is in general Git access tokens. That's one part. And then there's another part which is basically the cluster kube config secret, which is required for the cluster API. Right?
So I think I would phrase it this way, right? So the way that, so there is a token controller. What the token controller does, it's always the same. So someone asks to create tokens, and it creates a token. Today it's in Git TIA, but let's say it's also tomorrow in GitHub or GitLab or whatever other Git tool. The representative, let's say, result is mapped into a secret that lives in the management cluster. So that's the role of the token controller, right? It basically says I get a demand to create a token, and he maps that token into a secret inside of the management cluster. There is a second component. So some of these secrets that it creates have a special annotation, and that special annotation is then used by the Bootstrap controller, Bootstrap secret controller, to be exact. I have it in the slide. To then know that this secret is to be transferred, right? So that annotation basically says, hey, you need to transfer the secret to another place. And that's the indication. So the annotation basically tells that. And that is then triggering the Bootstrap secret controller, sorry, to find a way to then access that workload cluster so it knows the destination. And then it does the transform. So that's
Wim, can I ask a quick question here? So when you register, when you create the workload cluster,
yes.
do they register into management cluster? Because for Bootstrap for annotation, they determine target destination as to me. That means they need to know list of the registered workload cluster, or will you handling the more loosely coupled way? So that means to me, when I hear Bootstrap secret controller, they need to know where to send based on annotation.
Yeah, so that's happening. So all of this happens as part of the workload cluster creation, right?
Yes.
So
right.
So there is a bunch of parallel work being triggered, right, when we create a workload cluster. But I just answer your question. The workload cluster is registered in the management cluster today.
Right. That's my thought. Okay. That's okay. Got it.
And the consequence of the registration and then the creation is a secret that contains the kubeconfig file to access that cluster, but this is the admin kubeconfig file, so that's another contention probably from a security perspective.
Exactly. Yes, I understand.
And so we need to generate, in my view, a special, or we need to generate a specific token that the Bootstrap secret controller can use to access that workload cluster rather than using the generic thing. But yeah, so as part of the workload cluster creation, there is a corresponding secret, admin secret, if you will, created in the management cluster as well.
Okay.
Yeah, got it. So Wim, a follow-up thing would be, I mean, at a high level requirements, right? I mean, we've got two types of secrets over here. One is the Git secret and one is the cluster config secret itself, right? So from a top level, that's what it looks like, right? And if you're getting that from a vault or some API, then we need to put both of these in the API and then get them.
Now I think so from my perspective, if I'm not let's say an expert in security, but a little bit. First of all, I think the secret that represents the workload cluster, right, is an admin secret, if you will, right?
Right. Agreed.
I have the feeling that is already, let's say, a broken security principle, because we should probably generate a specific secret, a specific token, if you will, which is then maybe how we represent that is then to be discussed. But we need to represent a specific token for that Bootstrap secret controller and not leverage the admin secret, if you will. Right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we want to go more restricted scope and say that this is only restricted to the Bootstrap and not to the general.
Yeah, and you have to only expose the specific access rights to the Bootstrap secret controller that he has the rights to, rather than giving him full-blown access, right? Because if someone gets access to the Bootstrap secret controller software, he has keys to the kingdom, if you will.
Correct. So basically, some sort of RBAC role associated with that particular secret should be a good enough thing, right? Basically, we say only this particular resource, only this particular thing you are allowed to write.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking about is like, as part of the workload cluster creation, which we don't do today, we could generate such a token, right, that gives those access secrets. There is two things in my view that we need to do from my perspective. One is to generate a specific token for the Bootstrap secret controller, but also I think there is the Bootstrap package controller that is also access. So there is basically two. So as part of the workload cluster creation, we should generate two specific tokens for each of these representative controllers, similar to how if you run a controller locally in a cluster, you basically have a permission model and all that stuff, right? Where you say, okay, you have these resources, these are the sub-resources you have access to, and blah, 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 blah. So that has to be created, in my view, and that result is then to be used by those respective controllers, rather than right now where we blindly copy the full admin capability. So that's how I see it. And then, so one is generating those specific permissions for those specific controllers. And then the second piece is, okay, is secrets, the way we handle secrets the best way, or should we use a more, let's say, dynamic secret system like Vault, as you were highlighting, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, in general, I mean, at the top level, these are the two things, right? Sure, I think we'll just see. I think, but from an understanding perspective, I think we have a fair understanding. That's what I feel. But in case I think we've got any queries, we'll get back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
One question, Wim. Secrets sent to the workload cluster using cluster API. What happened in the workload cluster? They just store the incoming secret into the SCD.
So first,
yeah.
Yes, so it's stored in etcd, and the secret is used to access the repo. So to access the repo on which then other configurations. So why is the secret being set up? Is to basically access the repo for that particular workload cluster. And we generate a dedicated secret or token, if you will, for every cluster. So that is, and I think that's a good security practice, right? And so that secret is used to access that repo on which then, so there is additional, we have this whole package and port, right? So then, so this whole workflow or this whole system is there to bootstrap config sync or a GitOps tooling, right? That's basically why this is used. And once this is in place, that GitOps controller, if you will, whether it's Argo or Flux or config sync, so right now it's, I believe, mainly config sync, uses that token or that secret that is put in the workload cluster to access that that repo in Git. That's the purpose of the token.
Okay. So the workload cluster, when they need to access the GitHub, and then they have to contact the management cluster or the controller.
So the GitOps tooling, like if you install Argo or Flux in the workload cluster, so there is basically two controllers, and we splitted them, but they basically do the same thing. One is just for secrets, the other one installs packages, right? Which is basically a bunch of software. So in other words, the Bootstrap secret controller uses secrets. The Bootstrap package controller installs software, if you will, right? So if you basically say, I want to use config sync as my GitOps tool, So as part of the workload cluster creation, someone says, okay, you want this GitOps tool. We have a dedicated repo, we call it management staging, right? In which that package is been put in place. And that Bootstrap package controller takes that all the resources in there and pushes, instead of pull, it pushes those software into it. So what will happen, and they both run in parallel, right? So they both run asynchronously. So when the secret is created, it's created, right? The package controller installs the software, and as part of the software, there's also the root sync configuration in the case of config sync. So what happens if the package software controller and that software or that related configuration would be created and the secret is not yet there, okay, they will retry. They say, okay, I installed my software, so I'll get up and running. But the secret is not there, so it will retry, right? So that's what the controller basically does. So that sorts itself out, even if they are happening independently. You see? So but the Bootstrap software controller is basically installing a bunch of software on the workload cluster that we need to get, which say the GitOps pipeline to run. And at the moment, what type of software is installed? It's actually the GitOps tooling, but also CNIs. So for example, so we are installing a CNI and we are installing, so we're installing a CNI, we're installing storage, and we're installing GitOps, which is config sync right now. And then we also install, which is actually, we should change, but we install as a hack right now, Multus, but we should change that because that's not needed. So the other two are needed. So config sync or GitOps basically, and the CNI and the storage is needed. Because if the CNI is not installed, the so config sync cannot even access the repo. So you need a CNI to be able to get DNS to work and to get having access outside of the cluster, right? So that's why there is a CNI needed. And then the storage is, yeah, you could argue whether it's needed or not, but yeah. So we don't absolutely need it, but so that's what's happening.
Okay, there was another question regarding key rotation in the document, I think.
Nothing is happening today.
Yeah, so I mean, in general, as a good practice, are we going to look at key rotation or?
I agree. We should. So these are all things. I think what we should, or the reason why I wanted to, why I raised this topic is because we are not secure in my view, right? And we should put the pieces in place to make it secure, or what are the elements that we need and what are the changes we need to do to make it secure, and then we have to work on that item and get this resolved somehow, right? That's kind of.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so we can basically, I think there is some understanding when properly we can put up something which tries to, suggest some sort of a solution. Probably next time we'll have something about that. So I think, yeah, this is a good start.
Yeah.
So, Wim, you said the nephew system is not secure. I agree, and secret is one of them. And then there is the component security, not just the secret. And then, for example, previously mentioned about service mesh, and then we need to some study on that. So if you have any input, some initial thought, it could be good start. And I mean, I used to handle service mesh in ONAP, but Nephew is different system. I think you heard it before my previous discussion, because the ONAP dealing with the predefined components, so we have luxury to configure each of the component we can do. But in Nephew, there's a built-in component which still can do that kind of exercise, but there's an additional controller coming in dynamically by vendor and operator. Then we have to engage the similar and security service mesh mechanism. That's another challenge to me.
Yes, but so I think last week I gave some input to the service mesh. I thought we could.
Yeah, I
Where is
mean,
it?
actually, yeah, I mean, it's there in the minutes actually. So
Okay, I'll read it then.
yeah, so there's this one, I think we can, so we have basically, we're trying to, I mean, based on that input, right? So we are basically trying to understand the flows which are happening within the core and within the edge and the edge and the regional cluster. So that's what we're trying to do. So probably next week we'll have some detail on the various flows which are there happening within the network, and that will set the requirements. I think we'll be happy to, sort of work with the team and we'll just share the details probably in the next meeting. So right now we don't have that amount of visibility in terms of the various flows which are happening. So we are trying to get the requirements in place. I think we'll just share with the team once we have some more details.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, if anybody else also has done, so that is one of the things which I had, and we were discussing internally is, so as of now, we've got a regional cluster and an edge cluster, but there's no ORAN component over here involved, right? I mean, is my understanding correct, or?
I think the ORAN is kind of, to me, okay, ORAN and Nephew, they are different system and they have going through external security handling. So it's different from internal Nephew handling. So I think that's a good topic we need to discuss, because Nephew need to communicate with other community like ORAN security. So, and yeah, that's good topic.
So is there any work, I think Alan was mentioning about SIG1 ORAN related activity, right? Is there something happening over there, or?
The ORAN meeting is on Wednesday. On Wednesday at 8, I think, 8 Pacific.
Okay. Fine, because we were trying to see, I mean, we were trying to see if there is any RIC or anything like that. So we didn't find an FU, so we were a bit this one, yeah.
Vim, so talking about ORAN and Nephew communication, have we discussed about the API between ORAN and the Nephew? And once we know, we can think about how to support secure communication.
Yes, I think there has been some discussion on the API, or at least I see the problem is right now is that for me, I cannot join those meetings anymore. I have a conflict. But I have been involved in discussing, there is I think they have good documentation, by the way. So there is a whole diagram on how the different components of ORAN and Nephew map together and stuff like that.
Okay, that's the working group too.
Yes.
Okay, then yeah, okay. I tried to join there too. Okay, thank you, Beam.
All right. Do we have anything else?
I don't have any.
Even I don't have anything.
All right. Then I think we can close the meeting, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Beam.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Yeah.